Welcome to the Solar Symposium at Westminster Oaks. This has been a fair while in the making, and you see the program up here. I have a sad announcement. Dr. Barbara Willis has had to delay or possibly cancel her appearance. Her mother is sick and she has to attend to that. Obviously, many of us here know about that situation, probably from both directions, from the paying attention and from the being paid attention to. So we wish her well. She did send a slide set, and I will zip through it, and she has notes, so hopefully I can say a little bit of what she might say. And Lonnie Draper has worked with some of the projects that she dealt with, so he can probably fill in some of those things. So, to get started, this project came about because when I first came here a little over 2 years ago, I looked around at the buildings, and it seemed to me that all of these tall buildings with flat roofs beg for solar. And in fact, as Lonnie will tell you, pitch roofs are not that difficult to put solar panels on either. So there's plenty of space here at Westminster Oaks, so it's serving, if you like, as an example for other possible places in which solar might be put on businesses, nonprofit, tall buildings, anywhere that you would like to have some decrease in overall costs and reduce the amount of fossil fuel use in the environment, and reduce pollution, and at least slow down climate change. So all of those things are good things to be thinking about, and that's what we're thinking about. As you can see, the cost of solar panels is drastically reduced in recent years, and Lonnie will probably talk also about that a little bit. Other places that we know about, a retirement community in Gainesville, affiliated with University of Florida, has already installed solar panels, and this is a worthwhile and successful operation for them. It's saving some 7 to 10% of their electric usage, possibly more, but that's at least where they're at now. And you may know about a couple of other things happening in Florida. An entire town, Babcock Farms in central Florida, was designed to be solar from the start. And in the Hurricane Ian, it never lost power, even though it was right in the path of the hurricane. There's another one at, another one in the Sarasota area called Hunters Point, and that was designed to be hurricane-proof, not just for a matter of solar panels, but also making the buildings hurricane-proof. And there are a number of examples where military stations have actually distributed solar power panels on their buildings and out in the available space, enable them to be completely free of the grid if that should be a problem for them. I think Lonnie may show this picture again. This is looking down on Westminster Oaks, and as you can see, there are large areas of flat roofs. This is the Canopy Oaks parking deck over which a canopy could be put in order to put solar panels. So there's lots of opportunity here, and in many other places in Tallahassee there are opportunities, even though, of course, there are lots of trees in Tallahassee, but the tall buildings get above that problem. Okay, could we go with the next presentation, please? Okay, so this is the slide set that Barbara Willis sent me. She's the Vice President for Administration at Florida Tallahassee State College, formerly TCC, and in charge of their overall operation, and she's overseen a number of solar projects on their various campuses. So, don't seem to be able to advance here. Can I get the next slide, please? Okay. So there are a number of campuses that are administered by Tallahassee State College. So it's one of 2023's top 10 college campuses. There are 7 campus sites. The main campus has 49 buildings with 1.6 million square feet on 200 plus acres in the main campus. They've got a lot of buildings, so they can and are thinking about solar. They have more than 100 degree programs and certificates and job training programs, and I think that they will probably be initiating a program in training for solar technicians also. I asked the president about that, President Motor, about that, and he said, well, we don't have that demand yet, but I think that will probably be coming. So that's a main place that we might be seeing that in the future. So they focus on they're focused on these issues, particularly related to sustainability, and they have a commitment to sustainability within the community, not just purely for sustainability purposes. It's not, I mean purely for sustainability processes, sorry, somebody else's slides. Not driven by economics, or at least not solely by economics, but by the desire to produce limited resources and reduce our impact on the environment. They want to be a role model for the community and to our students, and obviously the students are the future, particularly those in a college like TSC. They will be the artisans, they will be the mechanics, they will be the people who actually put all of this together, in addition to being the people who design and who analyze the various situations. So their entire effort is guided by a sustainability plan, and in 2019 they were a founding member of the Capital Area Sustainability Compact, and they seek clean energy, seek to promote clean energy so they're concerned with fiscal stewardship, and that involves something that I can't tell you a lot about, and I was hoping that indeed was what Dr. Willis was going to tell us about. So obviously you have to think about, when you're thinking about solar projects, installation, repairs, maintenance, software, the amount of electricity generated against the amount that you use, and that means the avoided cost of electricity. If you can generate your own, obviously you don't have to pay for it from the grid. And then these projects can be either via a purchase or leased. Those are decisions that have to be made, and I was hoping that she would address that in more detail. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to do that, but Lonnie might indeed say a little more about that. So their initiatives are, trying to do two things at once here, an energy savings performance contract. So they're looking at all of the items that they're spending money on, and spending money on energy is a big part of the business. Using recycled materials throughout the facilities, so they use a lot of recycled plastic for benches and furniture and so on. LED lighting, of course, we all know that one. Water bottle fillers rather than water fountains, so that you're not wasting water and you're not getting people to throw away water bottles. Building automation systems, I'm not sure what that encompasses. Electric vehicle chargers. The electric vehicles are obviously part of the future, and they're installing chargers over on TSC campus. They're looking at solar-powered phone charging stations, solar-powered power equipment, especially in landscaping and so on, and their participations, they participate in the City of Tallahassee solar farm project. That is, they buy power from the solar farm. They also have this institution down in Wakulla County, the Wakulla Environmental Institute. It's built to be a sustainable building, insulated concrete walls, solar panels on the, down here on the parking deck, rain collection tanks which are used for flushing toilets and also as a heat sink in order to help the air conditioning reduce the amount of energy that it uses. And these are, this is an example of the solar canopy over the Gazvini Health Education Center quadrangle here, which is actually a first floor quadrangle. And this entire canopy, which provides shade, is also a solar generating capacity. And Lonnie was involved in that project, so he may tell you a little more about that. And then they're also looking into, I don't think they've actually started this, putting solar coverings on walkways in campus. So that not only gives you shade when you're walking from building to building, but it also generates power. And that really is the bottom line here. In Florida, we're flooded with power, free power from the sky, and it seems silly not to make use of it. Okay, so that's the best I can do with Dr. Willis's slides. I'm sorry that she wasn't here. I wish her well. I think we might defer any questions that you might have directed to Dr. Willis to Dr. Draper, and he may be able to answer some of them. But if you have something that you want to comment on or ask a question of me, why I'm not so competent, we have a microphone for anybody that wishes to say anything right at this moment, and we have a few minutes. Okay? So we're ahead of ourselves here, and I would like to invite Dr. Lonnie Draper to come up and start his presentation. It's just possible that Dr. Willis will turn up late, and if she does, I think it's easy to slot her into the schedule here. So Dr. Draper is a founding member of IGT Solar, which is the 2023 Best of Tallahassee Solar Installing Company. And he's also a man of varied talents, trained in engineering initially, and very interested in building things and designing things, including a lot of medical software and medical devices. He's also trained as a physician and serves as an emergency physician at TMH. He also has a number of patents, including a patent on a compact solar panel system that goes on a pole and could be put in remote locations to serve as power for small facilities that are distributed out in the environment. So a lot of talent, a lot of interests, a lot of passion for renewable energy. Dr. Lonnie Draper.
Thank you. How about the slide changer, just in case? Might be in your pocket. I saw it in your hand.
No, not in my
It was
hand.
a sleight of hand into his left pocket. We'll see if I'm correct.
It is in my hand. Sorry about that.
All right, so thank you for having me here today. I've met a number of you in the past, and I'm glad to be back here again. So the objectives of today are to have participants be able to discuss the benefits of solar for both health and the environment. I know that's an interesting way to start it, but hopefully in this 20 minutes, you'll be able to answer questions for other people on a number of subjects. We're going to review the evaluation that was done for Westminster Oaks as an example of the cost analysis, and as an example for the cost analysis, we'll use Westminster Oaks evaluation for helping people understand the cost piece of the equation. By introduction, I know you're asking, why is an emergency medical doctor talking about solar? Well, it turns out that emergency medicine doctors are of the specialty of toxicology, which is poisons, toxins. And as it turns out, pollutions are toxins. Pollutions injure people. Pollutions are a major contribution to the burden of diseases in the United States and in the world. Air pollution is associated with a broad spectrum of acute and chronic illnesses such as lung cancer, COPD, cardiovascular disease, and strokes. Worldwide, ambient air pollution is associated with the cause of about 16% of lung cancers, about 25% of COPD deaths, 17% of ischemic heart disease and strokes, and 26% of respiratory infectious disease deaths. So we think of these diseases as native to us and part of aging, but the reality is pollution is a contribution to a large portion of illnesses in the United States and worldwide. In 2016, the last study that was done on this that I could find, ambient air pollution was responsible for more than 4.2 million deaths. It is real even though we don't see it, except that you do see it sometimes coming out the exhaust of a diesel truck, coming out the exhaust of a vehicle, coming out a smokestack in industry or electric production. You see it until it dilutes enough that you don't see it. But your lungs filter out those particles, those black pieces of smoke, which have the same poisons, the same carcinogens as cigarettes. So if you're inhaling dilutely polluted air, you're inhaling the same poisons that are in a cigarette that causes cancer and other forms of lung disease. So as a doctor, if I want to reduce the deaths, the illnesses of all people, I also want to reduce the deaths and illnesses caused by pollution. I don't only want to think about that you're going to get it anyway, I want to prevent it in the first place. As it turns out, the majority of those pollutants come from the mining, the processing, or the burning of some form of a carbon fuel. So the majority of those deaths are directly attributed to fossil fuels or some form of a carbon-based fuel. So it is my objective to reduce those illnesses, and so it's my commitment to find a way to do it. And it just so happens that a way to do it is to reduce the amount of carbon fuels burned and used, and a way to do that is solar energy. And since I can't solve all of the problems, I'll just focus on solving the reduction of illnesses by increasing the amount of solar energy used. So that sort of explains why a medical doctor is up here doing it. I have this philosophy that it's better to prevent an illness than it is to try to cure one, and that it's better to predict the future by creating it. And so I'm stepping out ahead and trying to prevent illnesses for the future, trying to clean the environment for the current. As it turns out, I studied engineering for a little while, and so I come by some of the solar energy easily. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the options on solar energy. I know that most of you understand what rooftop solar is. You've driven by, you've seen it on people's roofs, and you've seen images of it. And that is really only one of a variety of options for solar. It is the best option for Westminster Oaks, but not the best for all locations. Architectural solar, if I can get this light. So this is an example of the Apple building. It was designed specifically to have a complete solar roof and provide all of the energy for that building. It was designed from its inception to be an environmentally sound building from its inception, with solar being the major component of its roof structure, as opposed to the concept of let's build a building and then let's glue some solar on top of it. So we refer to that process of an architect starting with solar in the beginning, starting with the concept that the building will use less energy. As it turns out, when an architect makes a decision about a building, they're making a decision about the energy consumption of that building for the next 50 years. So the person you can think about when you're paying your electric bill is, who designed this place? You want the architects to start right from the beginning. How are we going to reduce carbon? So we refer to that as architectural solar. Solar also can make heat. In fact, the hottest point on the earth ever created was created with a solar farm, where they focused a lot of different mirrors onto one point. Making hot water with solar is really very easy if the rules, regulations, and economy don't get in your way. Putting any black substance with water in it outside will get warm, kind of like your car. So we refer to that as thermal solar. Solar farms, which you've driven by on I-10, are the most efficient economic forms of solar energy. You build a very big solar farm, you'll get your electricity the cheapest, but you also end up using up land. And I know that some people complain of that. There is an alternative to that, and what is referred to as agrivoltaic. So agrivoltaic is when you design the solar system specifically, in this case, to grow crops underneath the solar. We have a number of different methodologies for doing that, and one of those kinds of projects has already been envisioned for Tallahassee State College, just as a by-the-by. Architectural solar also involves when you design a building where every single window is a solar panel, and most people can't even tell that the building is an architectural solar design building. You've seen a little bit of this slide. I'm reusing it because it's excellent. So Westminster Oaks has lots of possibilities for solar. There are areas where you can have a solar farm. There are areas where you can float, because this is a floodable zone of this community. And we design solar systems that float on top of holding ponds, that float on lakes, that float in oceans. So we'd refer to that as floating solar. We design fences with solar. We've designed a system when you drive down the interstate and you see those large walls that are there, which are sound barrier walls. There isn't any reason why those could not be cladded with solar or originally built with solar panels. So you can build fences, and that would be just one of the little pieces of land as at least 3 or 4 different possible functions here at Westminster Oaks. As you've been told, of course, you also have a lot of good roofs. all of these roofs are viable for solar. This roof is viable at the Memory Center. The Azalea roofs are all viable for solar. But the easiest ones are going to be the 3 roofs of the Perry building, the Canopy Oaks, and Oak South and the Health Center. And we'll talk about those a little bit more. The evaluation that you asked IGT to do involved a lot of different processes. The first thing that we did was we mapped out the path of the sun over each of your buildings. And this is a demonstration of the pathway of the sun on particular months or particular days, and this happens to be the 10th hour of the 21st day of the first month of the year. The sun would be located at that spot. So the first thing we came to a conclusion is that the sun does travel over all of your roofs. And then we quantified that. Of course, you knew it was there, but we sort of had to do it. We quantified how much sun hits the roof of the Perry building. And as it turns out, it's a big number. It's 1,800. It's 1,800 kilowatt hours per meter square per year, which is a fairly big number. You get a lot of sunshine on the roof. The other aspects are there's a good bit of surface area. What you see is a little bit of an example of 130 kilowatts worth of solar panels distributed around to avoid the shading area. Some of the panels are even tilted towards the sun. We also did a roof structure and roof surface evaluation such that we have to determine that this roof membrane can allow solar, that the understructure of the roof is strong enough to hold solar, and that the architectural design of it allows for the additional weight for the solar. Although weight is not a predominant real issue with solar, they're very lightweight. It's actually wind mitigation, and your roofs have some interesting design that helps it. We also did a LiDAR evaluation, which is really determining the height of every building surface on the campus, and we used dot point LiDAR evaluation for that, and that gives us an evaluation of where is there something else that could actually create shade on top of this roof, and that turns out to be a fairly tall tree. And then these trees are tall, but they don't cast a shadow on the roof. Okay, it doesn't go, and then it all of a sudden goes small 12. We also studied the electrical plans of your buildings, because if you're producing your electricity on your roof, you have to bring it into every apartment. And we do that by essentially connecting to the main system. In this case, it would also be a grid-tied system. But the power that would be generated on the roof would go essentially directly to any device within the building before there would be demand or pulling from the grid. So solar will be used first as the option for the power during the time that the solar is out, which is a common question people ask. We designed 130 kilowatts to go on 3 different buildings, so Perry, Oak South, and the Health Center. Even though there is a lot more roof surface area, we designed for 130 kilowatts of solar because the current agreement with the city utility is to limit to 100 kilowatts under a standard contract, meaning a interconnection agreement. So we can only put a certain amount of solar on any building unless we go into a contractual relationship with the utility. And this campus would be a great partnership with the city of Tallahassee utility to be able to get an increased amount of solar and put it in such a way that it can benefit directly the city. You don't want to do the solar just for you. You want to help the entire community. The financial piece of it, which was a large portion of the work, is done with a model that's called levelized cost of energy. You're not supposed to be able to read this. It's actually about 40 cells wide and 40 cells tall, and has about 6 different worksheets on it. Levelized cost of energy was a modeling system created by the National Renewable Energy Lab. They did it to compare different sources of energy, like how do you compare what the true cost of solar energy is against the cost of against the cost of hydroelectricity or nuclear electricity or diesel generated electricity. And they did it such that you use the same terminology no matter what form of power was being used, and you did it over a lifetime instead of just saying, well, electricity costs this much today if I buy it from this source. Doesn't take into account the real life cycle cost. This model does not actually take into account pollution cost. If pollution cost were added into any of the equations, then solar would beat all forms, maybe wind. Offshore wind might compete. This model has been discussed a number of times with Michael. It's been forwarded to the Residents' Council, who hired IGT to do this study, and forwarded to administration, and then the environmental committee, I presume, will get it from the Residents' Council, and then I'll be available to answer this model in detail because it's fairly complicated. I did simplify it. So the simple approach to it is that the Perry building could hold 130 kilowatts of power, and that the lifetime cost of that power would be about $252,000. The return on the investment, well, let's just go with production first. So it costs about $252,000 in lifetime cost to have solar on the building. The investment is 314. So the lifetime cost is lower than the investment because the federal government is now giving tax credits to not-for-profit corporations, which is what Westminster Oaks is. So there's a number of benefits that they can get from that process, and that's most of the difference in the numbers. The production over 30 years would be 5,339 megawatts of power, a significant amount of power for a single building. It still is only about 13% of the power consumed by this building, or the Perry building. The return on investment, as it turns out, over 30 years is about $900,000. So if you invest $252,000, eventually you get $900,000 back. It will take about 7.5 years to pay back the initial investment of somewhere between $314,000 and $252,000, which gives a return on investment, if this were being looked at as only an investment, of 2.63. So from a financial analysis, it clearly makes sense to invest in solar for Westminster Oaks as a corporation, as residents. A return to the residents if they were paying the entire cost of the process. We also did different scenarios. So we did a optimistic scenario, we did a likely scenario, and we did a worst case scenario. And so even in the worst case scenarios, there's still a return on investment. The money you put in still causes your money to come back to you in a certain amount of time and pays for itself and starts paying back the investment. There was a summary, which is also going to be shared with the committee, which looks like this, which summarizes all of the details of what the analysis were, why it was done, what are the advantages of the system, disadvantages, risk, how do you mitigate the risk, and so on. My recommendation is really that Westminster Oaks install as much solar as is reasonable, that you're really investing in health and in the environment and in your own pocketbook, that you're investing for earnings as well as investing in Westminster Oaks and investing in the city of Tallahassee. The city of Tallahassee's made a commitment to invest in you, and they're putting in lots of solar energy and working with the utility to be in a good environmental steward. And I'll let the next speaker speak to most of those issues. And at this point, I can entertain questions on both some of Barbara's issues, what's happening at Tallahassee State College, what's happening at some of the other projects like the police department or other solar projects, and specifically Westminster. Go ahead, and can I bring you the microphone?
Figure out how this is on. Oh, there we go.
Did you or the city contemplate battery storage?
Yes, we did, both for this, specifically for this project. So batteries have a great value in hardening or mitigating storm issues, backing up power for instantaneous times and that type of stuff. This campus has a number of diesel generators, which are designed specifically to back up your emergency systems. If you didn't have generators, you would definitively want battery systems with your solar. With generators, you may want some battery systems as more rapid power backup, because generators are fairly slow to turn on, or for increased quantities of power. But it absolutely makes sense. It doesn't make rapid economic sense. Battery systems do not give you a return on investment. They're really, but neither does your diesel generator. The diesel generators that are outside of this building are turned on once a week. They burn fuel whether or not you get any benefit or not. You know, when you hear them running, they're not providing any power, they're just cycling. And there are some components with the city where we've talked about using diesel generators to back up entire systems and neighborhoods and so on. But they don't make economic sense. They pollute a lot. Would really rather use batteries. And if you're comparing a generator to batteries, then the generator wins economically in the first year, but the batteries win economically over 20 years. That was a long explanation to your question.
I have two questions. In your model runs, did they take in consideration the reduction in efficiency of the solar panels to convert sunlight to electricity over the extended life?
Yes, it's referred to in the industry as degradation, and we put in the specific degradation rates that we anticipated over the entire 30 years. The solar panels that were modeled for this project have a degradation of about 15% over 30 years. They lose about 1% in the first year, and then they lose a fraction of a percent for the remaining years. But even after 30 years, your panels are still producing 85% of their power, and that's in a warranty, not just an estimate.
All right. And my second question, did your model take into consideration the impact of the solar panels on property taxes?
So in the state of Florida, property taxes are exempt. That is, solar is exempt from property taxes, both the sales tax and property tax. You cannot assess a building at a higher rate of value as a result of adding solar to it, and that's in state law. So yes, we did.
I have a question.
Please.
If the new administration comes in and removes the contributions to, for example, this project, what percentage of the cost would we lose?
The current rebate for not-for-profits is 30%. Technically, it's not a rebate, although it is more like a rebate for a not-for-profit company. We don't anticipate that they'll be lost within a year or two. I think it will take some period of time for that to happen. The prior administration to the current administration did not eliminate those benefits that had gone into law before that administration came in. So I'm having a hard time knowing whether it's going to get reversed or not, but we don't see it happening, certainly not rapidly. It will, have to,
Could I just
it
make
will
a-
be fought.
Could I just make a comment? I think the rate of return that you're estimating there would survive a 30% cut in the
Yes,
government
you can still get a
contribution.
rate
It
of
would
return.
obviously be not quite as financially favorable, but it would probably come out okay.
Yes. There's also a 10%, which we only put a portion of in there. If you use American-made products to build the solar system, you qualify for an additional 10%. So you can get up to 40% tax benefits. But we didn't use a full estimate for that. We assumed that you wouldn't use, that all the projects would not be fully American-made products. Yes, sir.
A couple of months back, we had a near miss from a very powerful storm.
Yes.
I guess one of the questions I would have is what's the vulnerability of solar panels on roofs and other places to the effects of a major storm? And what would the repair or replacement costs be, and how would that factor into your model?
A two-part question. The first part can be answered in that it isn't just one storm, but we've had 20 storms in my tenure doing solar work here. I should tell you my first solar project was done in 1975. So I've actually had approaching 50 years of solar in my background, but in the North Florida area, we've been doing this for more than 12 years. So we have solar on the high school, we have solar in Bainbridge, we have solar fields, we have solar all over roofs, we have solar on commercial buildings, solar on the ground. And in the last 4 or 5 hurricanes, we've lost 0 solar panels to wind damage. We've lost a number in the 10, 15 over that period of time because some hard object hit it, like a tree branch. Hit solar panels. The cost of replacing a single solar panel is probably about $400 to replace one panel, so you just multiply it times that for how many panels. On your roofs, you have a parapet that is a wall around your roofs on each of these buildings, and that wall is a wind barrier. It's for water management. But it would protect your solar panels even more than, ground panels. And in this case, because it's a health structure, one of them is a health structure, that would require us to build at a stronger level for wind mitigation anyway. So it's very unlikely here, exceedingly unlikely, like much more likely on other places. Steve? Yes.
Would the solar power generated from these roofs apply to individual residences?
Currently, they would not, based on the way that systems are metered, unless you're living at one of the individual buildings. But if you're within, like the Perry building, or how, yes, there is a process of individual metering, but in this case, we design it that everybody gets the benefit sort of equally. The reality is, when you flip on power and you start pulling, it will pull to your house from the solar first, and then if that's not enough, it'll start pulling from the city.
So in
Just
case-
because we set it at a slightly higher voltage. I mean, that's the reason.
So in case of an emergency or hurricane that has taken electric power, city electric power out, would the solar continue to apply? to Westminster Oaks
Yeah.
buildings.
If you add a small battery system to the equation, then yes, the solar would work when you have lost utility power, but it does require that a battery system is added, even a small battery system.
You might notice from the overall view that Lonnie showed before, there's a lot of area on our individual independent living residences, but of course, an issue is that we don't own those residences, so who's going to pay for it? But in the future, you can imagine that those roofs would in fact be installed with solar and coupled together so that everybody gets a benefit out of it. But that's for the future. We take things step by step. Sorry.
He is referring to a methodology that if you read up on things, it would be called community solar, where you build over multiple buildings, everybody shares in it, and everybody gets a benefit from it. Hey, Steve?
Yeah, I've got some questions about the model and then a couple about Tallahassee State College. The investment of $314,000, was that for 130 kilowatts or one building, or
Yes,
was that was?
correct.
Okay,
You'd triple it for 3 buildings.
triple it for the 3 buildings.
So a budget of $1 million would cover 3 buildings.
And then when you considered the return on the investment, how many cents per kilowatt hour did you use to offset the
So
utility bill?
all 3 of the buildings are demand, and so we used about 7 cents a kilowatt for the power, and then we used $16.82 for the demand portion, and we used a factor of about 27%. So only 27% of the time would the solar impact the demand at a financial value. Those are the numbers,
27%
27%
on
of the
the
time.
demand charge?
Unless you add batteries, and then you can push that number up much higher.
And then insurance costs, increased insurance costs, was that factored into the model?
Yes, although it was a fairly small factor. A building like this, like Perry, is a significant investment, and so the insurance on a building that's a living quarters, it's a health facility, those insurances are already staggeringly high numbers. So the adverse effect of adding solar to a roof for it is most of the time a rounding error in the insurance. But we did add a factor.
And then my last question on the model is, what simple payback did you determine? In other words, simple payback, when would the cost, how many years would it take to pay off the
Somewhere
cost of the investment?
between 7 and 9 years, depending on which. So we had actually maybe 20 different assumptions in this model. It's a fairly complex model, and you can adjust all 20 of the assumptions. That's why there's a range. If you're optimistic on a lot of your assumptions, you can get down to 6 years. Pessimistic, you're really at 8 or 9 or 10 years.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Tallahassee State College, the photo that was shown, is that going to be that was a covered parking lot, but
No,
weren't you also involved in a covered walkway project?
yes.
Has that project been completed?
No. So the Gazvini Center, which is the health training facility, the nursing school, if you want to call it that, that patio space, it's not actually covered parking, it's a study area. So the building is 2 buildings beside each other, and it was an intensely hot area when the sun was shining on it, and fairly windy other times. And so we built a glass-on-glass canopy that seals off the area so that you can literally study out there. It allows 11% of light to penetrate and creates essentially a funnel effect for the heat, so that it's referred to as a chimney effect. But that's at near Tallahassee, hospital, Tallahassee Memorial Hospital at the Gasvini Center. That is complete and functional for a year, and it's outdone its, predictions. It's been very good. TCC has a number of projects. The Wakulla Environmental Institute has a project, has actually 3 different projects. There's a fish farming activity going on out there. We did one of the boats for the oyster harvesting. There's a parking canopy there. We also put in car chargers for that part of the campus. The sidewalk part of the project is going from the English building to the new high school on campus. It's about 500 feet long. It's actually about 8 different segments, and it has started construction. And it's 130 kilowatts. But we also did the power building there. So what's called combined power, which you also have a little bit on this campus. We also did 100 kilowatts of solar on that.
Super. Thank you.
I think those canopies are not completely opaque, right? So they're absorbing solar energy for generating power, but they also filter the sunlight, so you have filtered sunlight underneath. Right?
Correct, yeah. The canopy was designed specifically to allow 11% of the light through, and so, the solar is only 89%. But it's been very effective.
This appears to be a satisfactory investment. And my question to you, assuming that there's other situations like this, why hasn't it been done?
Here?
No, not here. I didn't say here. I
Yeah.
said if you have an equally favorable investment other places, why hasn't it been done?
So, well, first off, it has, so I could show you a dozen projects that we've done in this community. You probably just don't see them if you shop at Esposito's nursery. They've got 180 kilowatts on top of their roof. That whole complex municipal code has 260 kilowatts. So there are a number of commercial projects that have happened. And in your case, you have the most similar project is down in Gainesville, done by a friend of mine. But the number one reason that solar is not already installed at a lot of commercial buildings is the way that utility companies structure their rates. That's the number one issue. And then the second issue is, 50% of people don't believe in climate change. They don't understand the health risk involved, and they like doing things the same way that it's always been done. Those are the biggest factors. And then it takes somebody like me. I like designing solar. That's what I like to do. But it takes some salesman to get to the CEO to say, you need to buy solar for your building. And the CEO's number one importance 99% of the time is not adding solar.
So,
did you consider an active model as well as the?
We did. So do you mean rotating or moving solar? Yes. So solar can be built to track the sun in 3 axes, or it can be built to track the sun in just 2 axes. And there is a significant advantage to each of those systems. But sometimes what you do in some circumstances is you go to a less advantageous design that's less expensive, and you just put in a lot more solar panels. Solar panels themselves are now becoming the cheapest part of the entire equation. I can literally build a building, meaning put on the side walls and the roof, and do it all in solar for almost as much as I can do it in wood, and cheaper than I can clad a building in brick. So I literally can just buy a solar panel and put it on the outside of the building and say, that's the outside of the building, and it's cheaper than brick. Doesn't mean that we're doing it much.
So I've heard concerns that when you take and put solar on an old roof, that the roof loses its warranty. Would that be the case here?
No. All roofing companies have a warranty that includes the addition of power generating or power consumption stuff. So let's take an example of the Perry roof. The Perry roof has about 30 different things on top of the roof, right? So it's got two big, huge air conditioning systems. It's got lightning rods. It's got water ports, venting ports, air conditioning, recycling systems. All of those are penetrations through your roof that have to be within the warranty of the roof structure. And so solar panels fits into the same thing. The same thing that holds your air conditioner on your roof is the same thing, and it wasn't invented for solar. It was invented to hold something else on your roof. We just use the same products. They come with the same form of warranty for the roof. But you do have to use a specific product for each individual roof, and there are 3 different types of roof designs, and so we'd have to have 3 different feet. Is that what we call them?
A similar question about the roof, architectural question. The design of the installation for existing buildings, when it's time to replace the roof, how does that impact the installation?
Yeah. So I didn't understand the question part of it, but
Well,
when a roof needs to be replaced, which is less often under solar, by the way, solar protects the roofs. But when you do, we just remove it, just like the air conditioner people remove the air conditioner and the plumbers remove their pipes. And so
Does
it's the
that-
same process. It's
Does
fairly
that,
straightforward, not real
in
expensive.
essence, decommission the installation while the roof is being replaced?
Yes, that's essentially, we remove everything, kind of keep the location. Frequently, we leave the feet, or at least we leave the bolts of the feet, and then we just come back and put them right back where it was.
I see. Thank you.
I was wondering if you are aware of, I'm sure you are, what the local government, either Leon County, City of Tallahassee, and the school system as part of that, have they made any commitments to putting solar on their buildings? And right down the street from an elementary school that has lots of lovely overhangs and fancy things like that, but it just seems like a missed opportunity, particularly if Westminster made a commitment to doing that. It'd be nice if the school down the street was doing it too. No?
Yes. So I am aware of it, but I do want to,
Is it secret?
what? No. I'm going to give you a little bit of detail, but you've got a new speaker that's following me who's really the expert in knowing this stuff, and I want him to answer that question. I can speak specifically to schools. So I've met with Rockyhanna and school boards on the issue. So at this moment in time, there are schools all over the nation that are taking advantage of the not-for-profit and community solar components of the Infrastructure Act. So there are a bunch of places that absolutely are doing it. Here, there is no available money, or you can't get the people on the school board to be convinced that it's enough of a saving that they could do it, this year or next year, or that other kind of stuff. It's difficult on a sort of political level to get it done.
But the more examples that we have out in the community, maybe us, maybe others, then those school boards will see things that work and they'll want to get on the act. We are in fact up to the time of our original break, but we can make one more question.
Got a real simple one for you. I thought I heard you say that putting solar on Perry would not involve cutting down a tree.
That is correct. No trees would be affected.
How about the Memory Center and the Health Center?
None of the 3 buildings would it be necessary to take any trees out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
The big advantage of what we have right here, of course, is that the tall buildings are above the shade of the trees, so we don't even need to think about it. Other places might, but that's a different consultation.
Yeah.
So Thank you, Lonnie. That was great to fill in a lot of things that I didn't manage to do. And
I look forward to hearing the next two guests.
We have about a 15-minute break. There's coffee, water for tea, cold water, and cookies over there. So refresh yourselves for the next round. And we'll come back with Michael Olson from the city, who will answer some of those questions. Thanks again. Okay, folks. We're ready to start again. So we've heard by rather insubstantial proxy about the installations at TSC. And at great length and beautiful clarity from Lonnie about what the ideas are for a set of buildings like Westminster Oaks. We'll now hear the perspective of the person who's been supplying us energy for so long, the organization, not the person. Michael Olson is the Clean Energy and Resource Planning Manager for the City of Tallahassee's electric and gas utility. And what he does is he coordinates efforts to achieve the city's goals towards renewable energy efficiency, and clean transportation. So there are a lot of things that the city is doing, including solar panels, including electric vehicles, and so on, reducing the city's impact on the environment. And he's here to discuss the city's plan for clean energy in the future, with the hope that the city can be 100% clean energy by 2050, right?
No later than.
No later than, right. So Michael has a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, a master's degree in industrial engineering. He's a PhD candidate at FSU. ABD, that means all but dissertation, and the dissertation is the interesting part, right? And he's doing that in public policy, so putting all of that engineering expertise into action, we hope. So, Michael Olson.
Thank you, Mike. And good afternoon, everyone. I feel somewhat compelled to walk the room as I'm talking, kind of make this a Phil Donahue type show. I really enjoyed the Q&A from the prior session, and with just about every question, wish I could jump up beside Dr. Draper here and kind of provide additional perspective on, well, where is the city coming from on this? And equally, the electric and gas utility. What's really driving some of the push towards this transition? I would offer up, ask questions along the way. I think the format at the moment is I'll provide a background, probably a bit more context, the larger context of the clean energy transition in which Westminster Oaks fits, within which other commercial, residential customers fit. And I think knowing that larger context kind of helps both, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe identify what some of the challenges are, not just from an engineering or economic, but from a policy, from a community setting. And I think that's one of the drivers that Mike and the committee who organized this symposium sought to do, that make this somewhat of a working symposium as well. So I invite you all, if through your questions, to help us kind of overcome or think through some of these challenges. So I like the way Dr. Draper started his presentation. He anchored it in health and environment. And in just about every way, this clean energy is a public health issue. There are other drivers that the city's considering, such as economic development. Right now, $300 million a year go out to purchase natural gas fuel that drives our power plants that provide our electricity. If we can generate it within our community, that's less that's leaving the community and more that's circulating here. So there are some economic drivers, green workforce drivers, in addition to the sort of public health and environment. But it isn't lost on us, this transition is the clean energy transition. And the way the city, and by extension the utility, measures that environmental or that clean piece is through measuring carbon dioxide or carbon emissions. This chart here shows going back to 1990, emission quantities related to our power plants. So this isn't encompassing all of the community, which also should include transportation vehicles, stuff like this. This is just looking at the power plants. And you can see over the last few decades, although there's been some highs and lows, we've kept it relatively flat. And looking ahead, our goal is to drive it to zero. As Mike mentioned, no later than 2050 is our mandate, sooner where the economics and the technology allow us. A lot of this was achieved through improvements to our power plants to make them run much more efficiently, cleanly, and through investments in the community. Since the 90s, we've been offering a whole host of incentives in the form of rebates, grants, on-bill financing for energy efficient appliances and services for homes and businesses. But we do have our work cut out for us. But I did want to lead, similar to Dr. Draper, with the clean message. One of the primary drivers here is to reduce emissions, which further reduces the issues with, say, climate change and all. So, as you might expect from a solar symposium, I'm going to lead off with solar. On the utility side, solar is a good play. If you weren't already aware, I think I can still claim that Tallahassee is home to the world's largest airport-based solar farm. We have nearly, and it's just it's a big impressive number, 62 megawatts of solar located adjacent to our airport on the southwest side of town. That represents about 10% of our power needs, or about 5% of our energy needs across a year. And so it's a start, but it's going to be a challenge to scale. There was a question earlier about storms, the impact of storms on, say, solar plants. I'd like to share with you that solar actually is fairly resilient. So what we're looking at here is damage to a series of panels due to tornadoes that tore through the airport back in 2021. We recently had another round of tornadoes back in May that collectively did more damage to our grid than the three largest hurricanes prior, Hurricane Hermine, Irma, and Michael. Those tornadoes back in May took out like over 400 poles in just a matter of 30 minutes, while most of us were on our way to work that morning. So in addition to hurricanes, now tornadoes are on our list. That same tornado went through either of our large natural gas-fired power plants. That power plant would likely be offline, if not for a year, maybe longer. And we'd be in a position where we'll have to figure out where we get excess power from other utilities. But going back to just 2021, a tornado actually tore through the solar farm. This next photo here shows the damage a little bit better. Went through, I think, in the late evening. By the next morning, the solar vendor was able to actually, or a solar operator is actually able to just take that portion offline and bring up the rest of the solar field. So by the next day, the power plant was back to producing all but a small portion. Again, if similar damage happened at one of our more traditional power plants, the impacts would be both extended and potentially crippling. So I did want to add that solar, in addition to being clean, does look to be resilient as well. That said, probably the biggest challenge is how do we scale it? So I mentioned 62 megawatts. That's in utility speak, a pretty big number. Again, it just represents less than about 5 to 10% of our energy and power needs. I'm going to show a little blue. So you see the little blue there? That's the size of the solar farm. That sits on a few hundred acres there. In order to scale up for solar to meet 100% of our needs, it'd just be impossible. And then we're looking at there was a question earlier about trees. You know, if you look at this Google Earth type map here, you'll see there's not a lot of open area. The airport made for a perfect first play in solar because the area adjacent to the airport was already cleared of trees, in large part to reduce animal and bird strikes with planes taking off and landing. It's also property that's sat right off of a runway, so is otherwise undevelopable. I'm not going to locate a housing complex out there or retail. So there aren't many big open tracts of land that don't have other values that could be considered. So solar alone on the utility side isn't going to solve it, and that's why we're out here today, and I'll walk you through part of our clean energy plan. It's going to take a community approach. We're not going to be able to do it just on the utility alone. So it being a community approach, back in 2019, the City Commission unanimously signed a clean energy resolution that basically set in play the mandate, let's get us there, let's get us off of fossil fuels, let's stop emitting carbon, let's mitigate risks to climate change, and let's get there as fast as we can. But city, utility, don't design this game plan in a bubble. Get out in the community, talk with folks, figure out what pathway forward makes sense for us, for Tallahassee. And so that's what we did. Unfortunately, soon after that 2019 resolution came the 2020 COVID pandemic. So it was a very challenging time to start community conversations when all of us were in lockdown. That said, we hosted a number of virtual meetings, and then when the community started opening up, we got out into the streets and did some town halls and all. And what we heard back from folks, we heard unanimously, Tallahassee loves its trees. Doesn't make sense to wholesale clear-cut trees for solar. So let's look at solar where it makes sense. That said, We also heard from the community, we want the clean energy transition to happen here. We don't want to rely on energy, solar energy or wind energy in the mid-upper states. To the extent we can be self-sufficient in Tallahassee, let's do it here. Has to be cost-effective to keep rates affordable. And of course, whatever pathway forward, still maintain a reliable, resilient grid. There was also a nod for this pathway to be equitable. In other words, that every member of the community can contribute in part to this clean energy transition and benefit from it. And we needed to continue to be a leader in this space. It's not enough to just have the world's largest airport-based solar farm. We need to continue to push the needle. Our next speaker, Dr. Helen Lee, we've been working with FSU, FAMU for decades on moving the research and development piece ahead, and using Tallahassee kind of as a sandbox for new technologies and putting our university system up front. So with that, we have our primary drivers. That's environmental health, public health, green development. We have our priorities from the community. Before I jump into, well, okay, Michael, you've teased it long enough. What's the plan? What's Tallahassee doing? Before I do that, let me just step back and tell you what it is to be a municipal utility. If you weren't already aware, this is a quick 101 on utilities, so you can understand some of the drivers behind how we came to our plan. So, of course, when you think of utility, you think of power plants. The word we use is generation. We have two large natural gas-fired power plants that produce power. We have a smaller power plant located near TMH, actually just down the road from the Gatsvini Center, where Dr. Draper mentioned have the solar canopy. And then we have the two large solar farms. We have our grid or transmission system that moves the power to and within the community, to include commercial, residential. There's lots of parts and pieces, but basically that's it. You've got supply on one end, demand on the other, and that's sort of the envelope from which we build out the clean energy plan. So the goals do look at all of it. So at the beginning, there are goals for the city side or the utility side. The first being, hey, let's continue to move off natural gas-fired generation to solar. There are goals on making our transmission system more efficient, moving more clean energy. Mike, I'll be there in just a sec. And then finally, and kind of the reason we're out here today, there is a lot we can be doing within the community, within sort of our demand side. So the goals I wanted to leave you all with, and then open it up for some questions, is that clean energy is, it begins with shrinking our energy footprint, getting rid of wasteful energy practices. So we have a goal by 2030 to reduce our community-wide energy needs by 5%, to increase our solar by 30 to 50 megawatts. Right now we're sitting somewhere just north of 13 megawatts. The clean energy journey isn't just about the built environment, it's also about clean transportation. Part of that is electric vehicles, electric buses, but we're also looking at multimodal options, mixed use development and such. And finally, want to leave you with the idea of the grid of the future is going to be more flexible as we try to take advantage of automation in the homes, in the businesses, the ability to use energy at strategic times. Dr. Draper mentioned with batteries, there's not much value today from a utility perspective, but down the road, it can be very valuable to us in terms of if we've got excess solar we're pushing on the grid, we might send out a signal, hey, charge up your batteries, and you can do it for a cut rate. Likewise, if we see a lot of congestion on our grid, we may pay you to run your batteries more during that hour or two of the day. So this idea of more of a give and take between the utility and the community lowers the overall cost without too much inconvenience and all. And that's a concept, you may hear this term over time, virtual power plants. So it's not just on the generation side, but within the community. So I will offer up as we move to the Q&A portion. You can find online the full Clean Energy Plan, and I invite you to have a read. We wrote it in a way that hopefully lays it out clearly. There are 7 goals, 3 of which I highlight here. Goal number 4 is the one that kind of maps out what's our strategy for reducing our energy footprint. Goal 7 looks at what actions are we taking to clean the transportation sector? And then finally, and most pertinent to the symposium here, goal number 2, how do we overcome the hurdles or barriers for commercial, for residential investment in solar within our community? So we outlined a number of action items under goal 2. So with that, and with the remaining minute or two, love to entertain a question or two. We'll invite the next speaker up, and then I think all 3 speakers will be back up here for more of a panel Q&A. So Mike, with your permission, 1 or 2 questions before we move? Microphone coming right behind.
Yes, I wanted to know how the city's is transitioning its bus system to electric, how that is going.
Yeah, so we're leaders in that space. We're a little over 1/3 of our bus system is all electric. To date, we have 23 all-electric buses out of a fleet of 63. The majority of those buses serve the FSU campus territory. You have a follow-up?
Yeah. Well, how did you get the manpower that knew how to service these vehicles?
Oh, so the upkeep, the maintenance.
Right. Yeah.
So I would say we have a fantastic fleet organization. They're the group that is not only leading the transition on our Star Metro fleet, that's our bus service, but also developing that skill set along the way. So we're working with the product manufacturers, the battery manufacturers. We're also, though, in the process of building out a large bus charging depot. Right now, we charge the buses at one of 3 smaller charging stations, but we're looking to build out as our fleet continues to grow charging. So I think the more succinct response is we're learning as we go.
Could I just connect us with rooftop solar at Westminster? So the city allows solar generating people to sell electricity back to the city at the same rate that they buy it, which means you're certainly tolerant of that kind of activity. Is it also encouraged, and does it seem to be a significant addition to the overall plan if more people have solar on their roofs, both businesses and residences?
Well, I would say it's an essential part of the plan. So where right now we have community-wide with rooftop solar, again, somewhere around 13 to 14 megawatts all in. And the large solar farm is about 62 megawatts by comparison. Together, we're still less than 10% of the way to our clean energy goals. And as I mentioned, building out more and more solar on the utility side isn't going to get us there and isn't going to be a popular option. And there is still much more room and space to move the community from that 13 megawatts to upwards of 50. Now, there may be some hurdles. When the question was posed, Dr. Draper, well, if it economically shakes out, why aren't more commercial customers doing it? I won't disagree. There's no reporters here. I might be recorded. I won't disagree that there are hurdles within maybe the city and utility. But I would offer up, there is much more at play as well. Access to $250,000 in capital to get a project going, or the financing to do it, the technical expertise to stand up that system to maintain it, the ability for a commercial entity to know that they would be viable for 30 years down the road, to see that, or at least 7 to 8 to see return on investment. So there are certainly multiple drivers or hurdles, rather. Part of our participation, not only in this symposium, but working with Mike and his team and IGT Solar and others behind the scenes, is to sort out those hurdles, help overcome them, and move forward. One of which may be that 100 kW net metering cap. You know, that might be something we look to re-examine, as it may limit the potential for Westminster to maximize their return. I fear I'll take the rest of the symposium.
Very quick question.
I'm going to assume that Westminster Oaks is going to cooperate with all this. And tomorrow we'll start.
Excellent.
Yeah, but when my question is, how much and what kind of help will the city help us when we really get started here?
Okay, so the question, what kind of help? So at the moment, Westminster Oaks has a key account rep that will help the organization kind of navigate, say, permitting process, all that, to the extent there are questions. The city has in place a net metering program that recognizes that every kWh or every unit of energy that comes back will buy it or take that essentially at the retail rate. I guess the last part I'd say is as management encounters hurdles or obstacles, we'll be at the table with IGT Solar, with engineers, say, okay, let's sort through this. We have to. We aren't going to reach our community goals without it. So using Westminster as sort of a laboratory, if you will, to give us some insight as to, well, what's happening here, or the hurdles you all experience here may be experienced by other commercial entities. So what we can accomplish here may translate elsewhere. So we'll be at the table for what that's worth. Did that address your question, or?
Yeah, I think we have to move on.
Wait to be
because we're
seen,
running
right?
into
I think
Professor
so.
Lee's time. But we will have
Thank you.
question time at the end. We can come back to these questions And I also wanted to ask Michael about demand cost as it gets to relate to, how you organize things. So our next speaker and our final speaker is Professor Hui Li. She is from the FSU Center for Advanced Power Systems, and she's also a professor at the FAMU FSU College of Engineering. She has a PhD from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, in electrical engineering, and prior degrees from universities in China. So, Professor Li.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. And my name is Hui Li, but my colleagues call me Helen, and you guys can call me Helen as well. I joined FSU 22 years ago. Okay, so I think I'm qualified to be a very loyal and Tallahassee citizen here. So I'm very excited to share the solar research conducted at FSU CAPS, Center for Advanced Power System, and the College of Engineering with you all. And I'm very glad to see our old friend and Michael. We have collaborated for more than 10 years. And also very glad to find out one of our projects that we may need Dr. Draper's help. Okay. So my research area is power electronics. I want to give a very brief introduction. What is power electronics? So power electronics is the technology to control and the conversion of electricity. So now it is one of the key enabling technology for achieving decarbonization and 100% renewable in the power grid. Well, my research focuses on the PV system control, modeling, design, and architecture with storage integration, high power density model drive for electrical vehicle, electrical ship, and electrical aircraft. So most of my work focuses on the hardware and the software development. Well, I also work at a Center for Advanced Power System. Maybe some of you have heard about the CAPS. CAPS was established in 2000, so that's why they hire me, okay? And sponsored by Office of Naval Research. And it is now has become a world, I would say, internationally well-known power center for research and education related to application of new technologies to electrical power system. The CAPS was located at the Innovation Park, very close to the College of Engineering, and also close to the National High Magnetic Field Lab. Actually, CAPS was a spin-off from High Mag Lab. CAPS also lead the ONR-funded Electrical Ship Research and Development Consortium, ESRDC, and also funded from DOE, ARPA-E, and industry partners, and National Science Foundation as well. CAPS has a very diversified research areas, but today I'm going to focus on the power research at CAPS. The power research at the CAPS has an emphasis on the solar energy system integration, and the power supply for data center, and the transportation, electrification, as well as the education and the training of next generation power engineers. We partner with the major industry in great technologies like Siemens, Hitachi Energy, ABB, and I would say the pioneers in transportation electrification, including GE Aviation, Boeing, and Raytheon Technology, Collins Aerospace, and Eaton. And we also work closely with the data center giants like Meta and Google. And our research project at CAPS are sponsored by the federal agencies like National Science Foundation, NASA, Office of Naval Research, Department of Energy, and APAE. We will also look forward to collaborating with our local industry down the road. So we know that PV plays a major role in the energy transition. And in 2023, solar energy represented over 75% of all renewable electricity technologies. Due to these following reasons, because of the constant cost reduction and also the enhanced market competitiveness, workforce competence, and investor confidence. And in 2023, USA ranked the third globally with 169.5 gigawatts of installed PV capacity, and behind China and the European Union. And we know that residential solar system costs have constantly dropped annually, and the storage attachment rate have been also steadily increasing, with 20% of residential and 80% of non-residential system installed in 2023 with battery storage. And also the price of the lithium-ion battery keep on decreasing. And recently, we have a proposal working with Michael that we're trying to use that second-hand battery retired from the electrical vehicle and work with solar, and to that will further reduce the cost. Well, I want to talk about the grid evolution. For today's grid, we have large power plants. Michael already mentioned that. And we also have a synchronous machine dominated. So that we have a very slow dynamics because of due to the mechanical control. But for the future grids will be electronics controlled, and features a small distributed generation and a microgrid architecture, and also power electronics dominated. So this will enable very fast dynamics, and also for the automated power flow, and also with the bidirectional energy and information. So for power engineering community, one of our dream is to build our power infrastructure like the internet. So we call it the power internet highway. So we can have all this, everything becomes so intelligent and controlled. Well, for the smart solar distribution, which integrated PV and energy storage, definitely play a very critical role in supporting the development of the future grid. So the PV inverter here is, you can think this is a black box, is the key component to link the PV module and the power grids. So efficiency is the #1 consideration when we develop these PV inverters. And the power density is also very important. We want these power inverters, the size is smaller and smaller, and the weight is also lighter. So this, which can be for easy installation and maintenance, and also convenient for shipment, especially when we have a limited space. If we have a smaller PV inverter, it's easily to install them. Well, we have 3 different kind of PV inverters: central inverter, and a string inverter, and a micro inverter. Central inverter usually think I lose the one. Yeah, I think I lose the one slide for central inverter. Okay, central inverter, we can see from here. It's usually for the PV panel, when we have a PV panel more than 15. I believe for our airport, the PV farm, we use the central inverter. So, but the central inverter, the problems is that although the entry cost is cheap, but the system level cost may be still high. And for the string inverter, it is the most cost-effective PV inverter, but usually it used for in solar system and that fewer than 15 panels. So the advantage of the string inverter is it is most cost-effective PV inverter and also can achieve very high efficiency, easy to maintain, and also can scalable to a much higher voltage and higher power level. The drawback of a string inverter is it has a limited performance monitoring, and the reliability is not as high as microinverter. And for the space requirement, is better for the central inverter, but not as good as the microinverter. For residential application, microinverter is one of the best solution. So for microinverter, so each PV panel will connect with the microinverter. So this can realize much higher energy harvest. But the problem is the cost is definitely much, much higher. So at FSU, we developed the 100 kilowatt string PV inverter using the new generation semiconductor device we call the silicon carbide device. So we have achieved this inverter is 100 kilowatt inverter. If you use traditional technology, the size will be this big. And then we achieved the world record, the power density and power efficiency. I think our students also made a video. So can we play that video? It is showing up there. Oh. Thank you. So actually for the Gen 1 power converter, a PV converter, and we achieved that 3 times the power density, higher power density. But then our students keep on improving this technology. So use the same size and the weight, we achieved 100 kilowatts. So this is the really, really great achievement. Okay, so now we can talk about the the current ongoing project is also sponsored by the Department of Energy Solar Office. So we call it SETO office. So this project is focusing on developing a unified universal control and coordination of inverter-based resource for a hybrid PV plus battery plant. So we work closely with the city, Tallahassee. And so this is basically focused on the control part. So when we have that, how to say, the hurricane or whatever, and this microgrid is disconnected from the main grid. So, but this community can still powered by the microgrid. So microgrid is going to provide the power for the critical load. And at this condition, we call it a black start. So we developed a very advanced control algorithm to achieve this ultra-fast black start. And also we can let this, all the PV and the battery can provide the power in a very reliable way, especially when all the fault conditions happened. So when the grid voltage dropped, and we call the low voltage right through, and all these converter and can still connect it to the grid and continue to provide power. And for this project, we're going to build the 100 kilowatt PV plus battery plant to implement our developed control algorithm. I noticed someone asked questions to cut down the trees, and for our, when we install the 100 kilowatt PV, we have to remove some bushes because we don't have tall buildings. Our building is kind of low, but everything is so far so good, and hopefully, and Dr. Draper can help us to finish it, this project. And we also have another project called the DOE Rider Project, and the lead PI is Dr. Simon Fu from ECE department, and the lead this project is led by FAMU. And we call it develop a hard swap and a modular PV and a battery system to achieve faster restoration from natural disaster for vulnerable communities. I'm not in this project, so I may not be able to provide a lot of details, but Dr. Fu has his email. Okay, so if anyone is interested in this project, you guys can also send an email to me. I can also help you to contact with him. And Dr. Fu also developed some solar cells, not just on the PV inverter aspect. And our CAPS, we also develop a standardized power electronics interface for the grid. So this is our converter, and we interface. We can interface with the battery, or this converter can also interface with the PV, and then connected to the grid. So we achieve the bidirectional communication capability and the health monitoring of all the key components in this inverter, and achieve the low voltage right through function. This one is not related to the PV and the grid. This is transportation electrification. This is for the hydrogen-based electrified aircraft, and co-led by CAPS, National High Magnetic Field, and also the mechanical engineering department to develop of this to achieve the zero emission aviation, and sponsored by NASA. Okay, this is my last slide. And I know that our research is not very closely related to the local community. If you are interested in that applied electronics and the inverter technology, feel free to ask us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was fascinating. I thought you might be talking about advances in solar panel design, but this is really interesting and forward-looking, which is really what we wanted you to talk about. So we have questions for Professor Lee.
Westminster will need 6 of them. Westminster will need 6 of the 50 kilowatt ones.
Okay, our inverter uses the most advanced technology like a wide band gap semiconductor device. So we switch very, very faster. So that made our converter very small, very light. But I don't know that for this commercialization application, and I don't know if we can produce the 6 of them or not. For the student, for the research, just build one, okay, then they can graduate, we can publish a paper. Then we have that more than 30 issued patents. We really wanted to commercialize our technology, and especially to our local industry. That will be great. You can also test, pay very, very small amount of money. You can test to see if you like it. This can help that the PV inverter. Yeah, we're trying to sell our technology to all those big industry companies.
Yeah, of course, for our parochial interest here at Westminster Oaks, of course, nobody in this room decides anything. It's all decided by the corporate bigwigs down in Orlando. But we certainly would be, I think, forward-looking enough to think about new technologies. And the notion that we can save energy by converting DC power from the panels to AC power in use is certainly something that should be considered. But, you know, it'll all be dependent on the bean counters, I'm afraid.
Well,
but the advantages, of course, of reducing the amount of fossil fuel used is what the environmental group is really interested in. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think, on the other hand, some of our projects, they encourage the field demonstration. So that's why for some of our proposed work, we're trying to just develop our prototype. Maybe you can apply it to this community for free if you and other city allow us to do that behind the meter.
Yeah, I think that would be a wonderful thing to be a sort of demonstration, but we'll have to see whether the corporate decision makers actually agree with that. So any questions directly for Dr. Lee at this point? Okay, multiple microphones converging on the question.
The 100 kilowatt project with solar inverter and storage, has that been installed yet? Is it?
Not yet, not yet.
Have they started it?
Well, on the way, we purchased the 100 kilowatt PV inverter from Siemens, and Siemens is also our industry partner for this project. And we just clean all the space, and we are going to install a PV panel pretty soon. So this can be kind of like a pilot project for the community usage. And this project is supposed to end next April.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I think maybe by the end of next April, maybe we have some updates can share with the community.
Things are moving. So for us to be moving, I would like to invite the three speakers to come and sit at the table here. And if the speakers have questions for each other, perhaps they would be interested in doing that. If anybody has a question for any of the speakers or multiple speakers, please, please get ready your questions.
This may be seen as not critical, but there are quite a few of us who do pay our own electric bills. And in my community, we've talked about the possibility of having the home inspections and actually forking out some money for extra insulation ourselves, et cetera, if necessary, if Westminster wouldn't do that. And so I was wondering if it wouldn't be helpful if we decide to go that way to arrange with your inspectors to do all of them this week or next or something like that, so that they wouldn't have to go from house to house to house all over the county.
And with respect to inspectors, you're referring to, say, our energy auditors who would come out, identify levels of insulation, other work that could be done. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll circle back with our program manager over our energy audit team and discuss.
Yeah, and I think I've talked to the maintenance department here. They're very happy to have energy audits done on the individual residences. Solar panels on individual residences will be a completely different thing because, you know, we don't own them and so on. But in the future, that might work.
How much solar power from the solar power farm is Westminster Oaks currently buying?
I think we buy 25% of our consumption on the solar farm rate. You pay a higher rate now, but you have a guaranteed rate until 2037, I think. And I think Westminster Oaks does participate in that program.
And have you seen the accounting bills for that?
I'm sorry?
Have you seen the accounting bills for that where we're actually charged?
I have not seen any of the bills for that.
I used to work in an accounting office, and that's tells the real truth.
Well, I'll let Michael say something on that.
I'll just offer for folks in the room. So in developing the two large solar farms out at the airport, we opened or created a program called Tallahassee Solar, in which we invited the community, residents, commercial property owners to essentially subscribe to 100%, 50%, or 25% of their monthly energy needs would be met by the energy produced at that solar farm. About a year or two ago, we met our full subscription rate, so that program's no longer open. Off the top of my head, I am not certain what level Westminster Oaks participates in. I'll research that and get back to you, Mike.
And I think a number of individual residences who pay their own bills have already gotten onto that program, got in under the wire there, but it's not open for new people until they build more panels.
Correct.
Other questions?
As somebody who's lived with solar for a few years before I moved here, some of the as someone who has there it goes. Someone who has lived with solar for several years before I moved here, there were some ideas that for the people who own their own homes and pay their own electric bills might want to know about is you can live with trees they don't, they interfere, but any kind of solar sunshine, even diluted by rain and so forth and so on, is still adding to your batteries. And so you can work around that. And the virtue of solar power is that it's in its basic form is a low-tech thing that ordinary people can do for themselves. And you can set up a system for 1,000 or 2,000 that will provide 12 volts of power. You don't have to go through a converter to convert it to 110. And there's a whole array of appliances and lighting things that can help you to reduce your overall use of electricity that's grown up around the 12-volt system. And so there are ways of not having to hook on. So in other words, there are ways where you can utilize solar power without buying into a big corporate or public system. That's all I had to say.
Sort of associated question for Professor Lee. So you mentioned that inverters are getting more efficient, panels are getting more efficient, batteries are getting more efficient. That seemed to be a continuous upward efficiency or downward cost line into the future, you think? Microphone, please.
For the efficiency, we always can maintain the 99%. So I think the problem is to keep this high efficiency, we are going to reduce the size and the weight. So, and also reduce the cost, because we can achieve high efficiency with a very expensive device. That is not good. So we can use that simple device, simple components, and and to achieve the same high efficiency. I think 99% is already kind of a high number. And at the same time, also the, resilient reliability. This is also the very important. And I also wanted to ask our these two experts here. So for that, the PV system, so usually we think the inverter is kind of reliable, maybe for the 30 years. So which component in the PV system is has the smallest that lifetime?
The inverters are currently warranted at the 10 and 12-year range. They tend to last about 15 years. So it is the inverters. And now the reality is inverters that we were installing 15 years ago are of a completely different technology. So they've been replaced with a much better technology. The efficiencies are better, the inverters are better, and so they're lasting longer and longer. But solar panels, we don't know how long they'll last yet. They've been in space for 55 years and they're still functioning.
Okay, we have questions at the back.
Yes. Thinking about a project for solar energy here on our campus, it seems as though the cost is all an upfront cost. So if we can install these things in 6 months, we would need to pay upward of $1 million for a substantial project here. But the benefits are enjoyed really downstream. I'm wondering, are there particular programs, incentives, or other kinds of things that can help offset the sort of the heavy front-end cost of this that would enable it to be paid gradually over time, creating a better incentive for folks here to consider that as an option?
There are private financing options for solar projects at every level. In fact, if you look at most solar projects that have some real expense, financing is really the #1 component of it. I believe that OR just did both of the city projects, and so technically, you can correct me on this, the city of Tallahassee solar systems were actually financed. Most, most all large solar projects are financed in one method or another. But it isn't always the most efficient unless you can have access to fairly low dollars. When Orgis financed those, their ability to get money was somewhere around 2%.
Yeah, and in addition, since Orgis is a for-profit company, they were able to take advantage of the up 30% more tax incentive, which the city at the time would not have been able to. That since has changed recently. Federal government now affords nonprofits, public entities, the ability to get a direct payment for investment. So our future plays in large solar, that is the city or utility, may indeed be owned, operated by the city, or we may continue a third-party agreement. For residential, commercial, the city does offer financing up to $20,000 for solar PV installation.
You have other questions? I have a slew of questions if nobody else wants to get in there.
Mike, I'll respond to that $20,000 one. It's the best program of financing of any program that we've ever dealt with as the City of Tallahassee solar financing program.
Thank you. On behalf of the city. I had a question, Dr. Draper, to the extent that you have your eye on the market. There's concern about cost and availability of solar panels down the road as a new administration takes office in January, potentially putting tariffs on solar panels manufactured out of country. Where do you see the cost of solar and availability of solar panels in the near future, say 1 to 3 years? To the extent that you can predict.
Yeah. So I can't predict what the administration is going to do, but it is likely that they'll put a 25% or higher tariff on solar panels from certain countries. But currently, the United States is making more solar panels than it's ever made historically, and part of that was the Infrastructure Act really pushed a number of companies to go ahead and make investments and do it. And I think that they've done it with some forms of promises that things will continue. The CHIPS Act helped a little bit in that they will be making wafers in the United States, which is the pieces that become solar panels. But the last time a tariff was implemented under solar panels, there was an immediate increase in the cost of solar panels across the board, whether we bought them from the United States, Canada, Mexico, Vietnam, China, which is where we personally have gotten most of our panels. So we anticipate that there would be an immediate increase of, say, 7 or 8%. So a tariff of 25% doesn't mean a 25% increase. It equates to about a 7% at the retail level. So we anticipate that American-made panels will go up, but there's many more of them, so we don't think it is going to be as bad. Availability will be easier because when you adjust the market demand with cost, the availability, like manufacturers are able to make the same number, so there will be plenty of panels.
I have a ancillary question. So one of the considerations is that solar increases your resiliency. And on this campus, all of our utilities are underground, but not so in the city of Tallahassee. Is that a question of economics, or why do we see this problem every time there's a hurricane or a tornado?
So 2 parts to your question, or the way I interpret it. I'll answer first the undergrounding versus overhead. All new development or all new extensions of our city electric grid are underground. And we've been doing that for some time. A good half of our distribution system, our electric grid, is actually underground. That still leaves about 1,500 miles of overhead lines. We tend to get this question following hurricanes, and I apologize, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it's in the billions to underground the existing overhead lines. It's in the decades to get that process completed, getting the right-of-ways, doing the construction. Whereas in every major event that's hit us over the last 10 decades, we've been able to stand up the grid within a matter of 3 to 4 days tops. For those of you concerned for outages in community, part one of your question, solar alone or solar on facilities here alone won't necessarily provide resiliency if the grid is off, if the substation that powers the community here, that's just a function primarily of safety. We can't put line workers, or in this case, our distribution workers out without some assurance there isn't energy or the lines aren't energized. That said, it is solved when we reintroduce energy storage or battery storage. So solar coupled with battery energy storage now creates that kind of microgrid, if you will, or that resiliency. So that's something we're looking at from the city. How do we, moving forward, not only move solar, but solar with storage so that it's not only clean, but we also get the resilience, reliability as well.
Yeah, in the past, of course, batteries have been expensive, unreliable, and short-lived, but that's improving, I believe.
Well, right, and as I mentioned in my presentation, this idea of kind of virtual power plants that is signaling to the community, hey, there's congestion on our grid, or we're forecasting a lot of traffic. If you can shift your usage or pull more from your battery during this time, or load up if we've got more solar, this sort of give and take that could happen automatically. That happens when we have devices such as batteries, such as water heaters, such as smart thermostats that are already, connected to Wi-Fi. They're smart. It just takes a little bit of input to make them an asset that works with the utility. In exchange for that, we would provide funding, or we're looking into that potential. So down the road, in addition to the resilience piece, there is the potential that that as a utility, begin to help offset that cost of investment through using it as a community resource as well, to the extent that folks want to participate, of course.
Okay, we're running up against the time for the celebration out in the bistro, so they're going to start up the band in a few minutes. But does anybody have a last question? I have a last off-the-wall question if you don't. Anybody have a question? Okay, so the gentleman down here mentioned using 12-volt power from solar panels, which of course is a boon for do-it-yourselfers, because it's, so long as you've got long arms and a lot of wire, you can hook a lot of things together. But it occurs to me that we've been using 60 cycle, 110 volts for goodness knows how many years. Is that the best way of actually supplying electricity? I think Dr. Lee might have an opinion, or any of you, all of you might have an opinion.
I mean, I can start with just from an electric utility standpoint, it's how electric's been done for the last 100
Right, there's a lot of
years.
invested.
And the reason is it is much safer to move that power in an alternating current long distances. Also, it was being generated through hydropower and all these very centralized power plants. So that was how the grid has evolved. But that's not necessarily what we've got today. With the ability to capture sunlight, which is everywhere, the fact that most of our stuff could run off of direct current, I don't know, there's some who might look down the road, let's move to more of a DC off of AC, more microgrid, more decentralized. That's going to take a monumental shift, you know, in the marketplace through utilities and stuff.
A lot of investment too.
It isn't a no. It's an exciting proposition for sure, but much bigger than we in Tallahassee can move or enforce.
Okay, well, I think we're out of time, so if we would thank the speakers once again, thanks very much for a very interesting session.